about the Watchtower Society. In Disney.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome in to our premiere program for the night. We have got Barara Anderson. Of course, she's the Watchtower insider that tells all. She has some special guests tonight as well. She'll tell you about them. But I want to welcome so many people coming in. The program was well promoted, and we do have lots of people, unusual traffic, coming into the 6 screens tonight. So we want to thank all the new ones that are coming in. We have a lot of people coming in from the Reddit forum, from the JWN forum. So we welcome you into the 6 screens, and we certainly hope that you'll find this program very, very important. Very important in getting people to find out what's going on behind the curtains of the Watchtower. So let's bring Barara on right now. Hello, Barara.
Howdy, Rick. That's a Tennessee way to say it, Rick. See, I got my southern accent on tonight. Actually, maybe we're going to be interviewing somebody from Australia. I'll ask him if it's southern Australia. Well, he's got an accent, let me tell you.
Well, you don't sound like a Tennessee person. I know you're from New York.
I worked out that. I'm a New Yorker.
Well, you never did get that Tennessee accent. So I'm gonna kind of cut you loose, and I want you to tell the audience about this very special program that you got coming up here tonight on the 6 screens. All right?
Oh, yes. We're excited about it, too. We prepared. We want everybody to know everything, going back all the way to 2008.
You got it. You got it.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
All right, Bob, you can do it. I'm going to step out. I'm here if you need me.
Okay. Well, folks, I know you've joined us because you really don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from Stephen Unthank, right now in Australia, and Samantha Radford right now in England. Should be going to bed right now in England because it's pretty late. Stephen, it's actually Sunday. So, but they have set aside all the things they have to do to talk to you all. You know, I see eye to eye with these two folk. We're activists. We're exposing the human rights violations of Jehovah's Witnesses organizationally and also individually. Before they speak, though, I want to share something I just found out, and I think you'll appreciate it as much as I do. When I was looking at Reddit, some of the comments that were made on Reddit, people are very, very incensed about the use of shunning against them, breaking up the family. It's trauma. It's trauma. Well, I wanted to say that, you know, I was born to Catholic parents, and so I was actually Catholic. That's the way it went. Generally, your religious affiliation is that way, and well, in many homes it's that way, where kids are raised in the denomination of their families or their parents. So if you have no religion, then you'll raise your kids without religion. And you have the freedom here, especially in the U.S., you can choose to be affiliated with or without a religion. But in the homes of Jehovah's Witnesses, that's not the case, as our listeners will go, yes, that's the case. Well, Joe and I were both, by choice, converted to Jehovah's Witnesses. We were punished by the denomination we were raised in. We raised our son, as expected in this religion, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And he had to obey the precepts of the witnesses. If he rebelled and was underage, we could have been held accountable, especially my husband as an elder. He would have been accountable, could have been removed if our son wasn't obedient or didn't stay in line with Jehovah's Witnesses' teachings. If he was baptized, a different story. He was held accountable for his actions. And that's where the trouble starts, because of mandated shunning required by Jehovah's Witnesses judicial committees when believers break the rules of Jehovah's Witnesses and are disfellowshipped and shunned by Watchtower's sanctioned judicial committees. So, we can't always blame the Watchtower, the leaders of the Watchtower, but there are those who are on these committees. They're responsible for this. They're sanctioned by the Watchtower to carry out the rules. And many, many listeners today, we know that. We were in this situation at one time, sitting before elders as they tried to sanction us. In our case, not for breaking rules, moral rules, but because of speaking about injustice that the organization was involved in. Now, here's where I want to tell you something that was very fascinating to me, because I'm a former Catholic. And you'll be amazed to learn where the Watchtower Society picked up the idea to set up judicial committees. Due to some outstanding historical public cases of well-known Jehovah's Witnesses within the religion who rebelled against it, there was a need by the leaders of the Watchtower to punish them. Well, all sorts of reasons, so we won't go into it. The use of judicial committees to decide not to or to excommunicate or disfellowship these Jehovah's Witnesses was used. Now, here and there, they use this punishment. I was reading one about somebody in 1940s, but that was very infrequent. Russell didn't go along with it. I have a quote that he said he didn't go along with shunning or disfellowshipping. And so it really became pronounced in 1952, because in 47, they said in the wake that they didn't go along with excommunication, but in 52, as I've said before, mandated shunning came along with the rule, came along with disfellowshipping. So these rules have changed over the years, and they've put different obligations upon people, families, how to behave, or how to, or should they or should they not associate with their disfellowshipped family member. Now, initially, these committees, these judicial committees, were simply called by the Watchtower disfellowshipping committees, and then later on they renamed them judicial committees. Well, this is what I was fascinated by. Our fellow activist and church historian, Jim Penton, who received his master's degree studying the Middle Ages, specifically the Inquisition. He stated that in his studies, he learned that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society's judicial committee arrangement is an exact replica of the Catholic's holy office of the Inquisition of the Middle Ages and the Spanish Inquisition of the modern period. Except that the inquisitors were better trained and they kept records. And neither of this is done by Jehovah's Witnesses inquisitors, who, in my vocabulary, I'm saying, and I want them to know, and they'll listen to this program tonight, as they always listen to these programs that we talk about their violations. And so, in these inquisitions, or these judicial meetings or committees, these men, they protect criminals. Because of the rules. It turns out that way, such as child molesters, who between judicial committees and the molester did to the child, they cause such injury to a young person that most of the times when they get adults, they're disfellowshipped and shunned. So here we have a situation, as I said, I'm a former Catholic. But this organization says, oh, and you know how Rutherford felt about it. Rutherford said, religion is a snare and a racket. Was he talking about his Baptist church that he left? I doubt that. He knew that there are good people in all religions. He was talking about the organization, the organized, many take nonprofit corporations or whatever they were, their leaders. Their rules were snares. And so he thought they were racketeers. Well, the two wonderful people that we're going to interview tonight, they have taken on the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses that, as far as I'm concerned, is a snare and a racket. Rutherford, if he lived now, we'd tell it to him, wouldn't we? We know that the way to deal with the problems that this religion is causing, especially our young people, are the ones who have grown up in this religion, not necessarily molested, but growing up in a religion like this has caused such heartache and headaches to families and to the kids themselves. So these two, really, they're just as fine people as you know. These are good people, and they are exposing publicly and legally this for-profit business that masquerades as a non-profit religion. So we want to start this program. There they are. There's Samantha, who I just met not too long ago, who's in England. Where in England? Samantha, where are you in England?
I'm in North London, Enfield.
Wonderful. I've been there. If only I was there. You weren't born. Oh my God. Okay. And let's go on to Stephen. And Stephen, this is a man I've known since 2011. And he was in the middle of all kinds of things. I was too. I came out in 2002. I was very involved. And I had a website in 2007. And what do you know it? Somebody contacted me in 2007, said they were a friend of this man in Australia who wanted to talk to me. And I thought that was amazing. So that's when we contacted each other. And he explained to me, I was very anxious to know what he was doing as far as exposing the Watchtower, if he was an activist, just what was he doing? So he's going to tell us this, and this is just one that's it for me, because this is the kind of thing he told me when I first met him when we talked on the phone. So, Stephen, you got to go way back in time. I think 13 years, maybe. Oh, that's when I met you in 11. So this is 2008. Something dramatic happened. Stephen?
That's correct. Yes.
Look at the Samantha. She's a new girl on the block. Okay, so she's going to have to wait her turn. I'm the old girl on the block. And you're this.
Barbara, this is Rick Farrant, the control panel here. We do have you're coming in okay, but you have been clearer in the past. Did you adjust your microphone? Did you do something different?
No, nothing.
No, nothing? Okay.
Oh, yes, I did. Oh, I see. Oh, my goodness. Hold a minute. I'm using the speaker that's on, comes with the screen, but I have another one that I usually use, but I never use it daily. So
yeah, in fact, you go ahead and set. I'll say hello to Steve, Samantha. Yeah, you go ahead and take care of that. Barbara's gonna. Barbara's gonna get. Okay, that's the one you want to use. That'll be better, yeah, because it's not as clear. People really want to hear you better than you have been. We've heard you, but it's not too good, so we'd be better here. But anyways, I'm glad to see Stephen on and Samantha, and I know Stephen's been on the 6 screens long ago. He knew Richard Rowie, and boy, I'll tell you,
yes.
That's right, Stephen. You were just, well, that was, can you believe that would have been, 15 years ago, 17 years ago?
2012, I gave an interview to Richard, and that was about 6 months, I think, before he passed away.
Right. Boy, that was so good to have you on there. My goodness. But a lot has taken place in the last 10, 15 years. I'll tell you that, Stephen. And I know you're doing your best out there, as well as Samantha, to expose this terrible organization. Barbara, you all set now?
I'm very, very well.
Oh, that's 1,000 times better. Thank you. I'm glad. I hated to come and interrupt, but I had to do it. Now we get you 1,000
I'm
times
so
better.
glad.
Thank
It's hard enough to listen to my voice. It needs help. So, Stephen, your activism started in 2008, and
That's correct. Yes.
let's start with the activism, but we'll go into your personal life at another point here. We got 2 full hours of lots of info. So, what happened in 2008?
Well, if we go back just 1 year before, the government in the jurisdiction I live in, the state of Victoria, started advertising that all ministers of religion and all religious volunteers are required to undergo a police check and obtain working with children card. And that is just to verify that they have no criminal conviction and to make sure that they were monitored for compliance with child protection laws. So that advertising ran for 12 months. And it became mandatory on July the 1st, 2008 for the Jehovah's Witness elders and ministerial servants and any volunteers within the religion who worked with children, such as in cleaning or childminding, to obtain a working with children card. So in the lead up, I started effectively lobbying within the religion because I was still a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses back then. And I brought this to the attention of a few elders that I knew. And one elder in particular saw that the law did apply, and he travelled to Bethel and he met with the branch committee and he informed them of these laws and how they will be applying to everyone in my state. And the branch committee and the Watchtower Society decided no, they are not going to comply with these mandatory child protection laws.
Is that right? Mm-hmm.
And the elder that went and met with them, he actually stated to me that he locked horns with them. And that's how stubborn goats these men were. July the 1st came around, and immediately on that day, it became a criminal offence for the elders to attend any congregation where there was a child because they didn't have a working with children card. And it became a criminal offence for the religion to engage them in what was called child-related work. So the religion effectively in Australia became a criminal organisation, operating as a criminal organisation. There were 2,000 elders that it applied to, in addition to ministerial servants and pioneers. None of them obtained their working with children check card. I stopped attending all of the congregation meetings except for one. I went to one congregation where I wasn't a member of and went in there to observe with my own eyes that the elders were working with children and that the law was being broken. So what I did was I gave it 28 days and there was still no compliance. So I went and reported the matter to the police.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember you're telling me about how these elders were going to the hospitals as clergy and visiting JW children,
yes,
even in the hospital, and they didn't have the card and they expected to do this?
That's correct. These were in children's hospitals. The hospital required everybody within the hospital, even staff, to obtain the working with children cards. And all the hospital did, but the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't. So I had meetings with the main children's hospitals in the state of Victoria and brought to their attention these breaches of child protection laws. And that caused quite a scandal, but that's a story for another time, that part. What I did not expect, though, was that the police were not prepared to do anything.
Mm-mm-mm.
1 year went past, 2 years went past, 3 years went
You're a
past.
patient
Still,
man.
I kept lobbying. I kept a track of the offences being committed. I obtained a list of all the people involved, all the congregations. I then started dealing with the Attorney General's office, members of the police force. It went higher and higher and higher up the chain of authority within the police force. Still, there was no action. And that wasn't acceptable because these were criminal offences that were being committed. And it wasn't just being committed by the elders, it was also being committed by the governing body who ran the religion, by the faithful and discreet slave who had oversight, by Watchtower, Pennsylvania, who was the overarching owners of the Kingdom Hall, and Watchtower Bible Tract Society of Australia, and also the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's the unincorporated body. So in effect, what was interesting was that the elders were committing offences by engaging themselves to work with children, in addition to committing offences by working with children. So they were doubling up on their list of offences they were committing, and nobody seemed to care.
But you did.
Yes,
And
I did.
so the next step, what was it?
Well, the next step was I compiled a massive brief of evidence for the police to use in a prosecution. The police refused. The Attorney General of Victoria contacted the Jehovah's Witnesses and informed them of their obligations under the law and offered to train all of the elders and all of the volunteers within the religion how to comply with the law. And they offered that for free. There was no cost. There was no expenses to obtain the police check. That was all waived. And there was no application fee.
It was $75, wasn't it, to the average person who worked with children? Yeah, but not to
the normal
clergy.
person.
Yeah,
but not for volunteers. So there was no financial outlay for them. They just had to comply with the law. They refused. So I contacted some members of parliament, and eventually I was able to deal with the Director of Public Prosecutions, who was unable to take on the case because the police hadn't taken on the case. So I received some very good advice on, if I want something to be done, I'm going to have to do it myself. And so I said yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what it takes.
So I became the informant. I became the prosecutor. I applied to bring the criminal charges as a private criminal prosecution. And that was all presented to the Chief Magistrate of Victoria. And we were able to circumvent Victoria Police because of their inaction.
Yeah, well, you had circumstances there that you could do all that, which we don't have in the States, to be a prosecutor, a citizen prosecutor, Stephen Unthank, right?
Maybe a fool.
Never a fool.
We do have some unique laws in our state that do allow for private prosecutions. Mm-hmm. If you can satisfy that the bodies that are meant to be doing the prosecution have failed, and if you can satisfy it's in the public interest, and that the offences are still being committed. So there was a couple of impasses that were met, but what I did was I appeared in May 2011 before a Victorian Parliament inquiry that was dealing with protecting Victoria's vulnerable children inquiry. And in there, I was able to present evidence that the police were not taking any action. And I was successful in obtaining consent to launch a private criminal prosecution. And I did that. And it was very difficult and it was very scary and frightening. But there was no choice. It had to be done.
Well, wasn't there something pretty big that took place right around that time in court?
Yes, I got permission to launch the prosecution. I did that.
You did that. That's when I was talking to you, and you were telling me blow by blow about what it was like in court. It was just. Amazing.
It was very interesting. It was very surreal at times. I managed to get permission from the Chief Magistrate of Victoria. And what happened in the whole proceedings is the Director of Public Prosecutions were going to withdraw the proceedings. They stated it wasn't in the public interest. But I disagreed with them by reason that if they withdrew the proceedings, I could reinstate them the next day because the offences were still being committed. So what happened was then the Victoria Police then threatened me with arrest and prosecution if I continued to stand up for child protection issues. But I looked into the matter and I realised it wasn't actually possible for that to occur because of a number of very key things that happened. One of them was that I had a letter from the police where the police stated that they were happy with the Department of Justice to manage the case. And then I had a letter from the Department of Justice that said that they were happy that the police were going to manage the case. Therefore, no one was managing the case. Therefore, if I took the case on myself and managed it, I wasn't interfering with any police prosecution because there wasn't one. And I did that. And I went to court and the trial or the proceedings started on July the 26th, 2011. They ran into the next year.
Yeah. And who was in the audience and who was represented? That's what I liked.
Yeah, that's the story that's interesting. There was a lot of people that turned up to the hearings, but what was interesting in one of the hearings was the Jehovah's Witnesses were trying to escape from being prosecuted. And in the middle of the proceedings, they were not getting their way. And I had brought criminal charges against the faithful and discreet slave class. Because at that time, the faithful and discreet slave class existed Australia-wide. And there were several hundred of them members in Australia.
Uh-oh.
We lost sound with Stephen.
Stephen.
Okay, we lost Steve's sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send him a message here in private chat. Let him know. Put your two fingers up to your ear, Barbara, and kind of let him know we can't hear him.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Samantha. I heard.
Yeah, we can't hear. We can't hear you, Stephen. Maybe he can disconnect and connect the audio again.
I just sent him a message here that we can't hear him. So we'll see what happens. Okay. Well, why don't we go to Samantha? And I'm going to put up, if he's reading the comments, you'll see that we cannot hear Stephen. So go ahead, Barbara, move on to Samantha, and we'll try to get Stephen on, okay?
I think that he knows that we can't hear him. I think he already, because he tried to poke at his
Stephen, if you can't hear us, raise your hand. If you can't hear us, raise your hand. If you can hear us, raise your hand. No, he's not hearing us either.
No. So sometimes logging in and out might work. If he does that, that might reset it.
All right. Let's see what we can do here. That's a shame. It's not something disconnected yet. Let's see. Well, he can't hear us. He must know there's something is wrong. Check your. I'm going to come on here. Hold on 1 second. Stephen, I don't know if you can hear me. We cannot hear you. Cannot hear you. Stephen, we cannot hear you. See if that might work. I'm not sure. Okay, well, I don't know what to say at this point. I did message him, Stephen. We cannot hear you. Restart. I'm going to tell him to restart his. Stephen.
Oh, he's definitely muted now.
Stephen, are you? I'm going to check his mic here. Hold on 1 second. Okay, he's okay. He's all set now. Steve, can you hear us? Go ahead. You're on with us. I think he's all set now.
I can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, good.
Okay. Shall I continue the story?
But you're not loud enough. Speak up.
I'm not too sure what the... How's that? Is that better?
Not really, but we can hear it, but it's not as clear as it was.
I'm gonna bring the mic up. I can do that here. I can edit the sound here. All right. Okay, I think we should have a little louder now.
How's that? Is that sounding good?
Yes, better. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump back to the court proceedings in 2011. I got permission to do the prosecution. That was very intimidating, but I stuck to it. The Jehovah's Witnesses were charged, including the faithful and discreet slave, which was quite a very interesting event because, as far as I know, it's allowed, it's a possibility for an unincorporated body to be charged under our law. And with the working with children laws, it allowed for groups of people to be charged as what's called an unincorporated association. And what that means is a group of, say, mums or dads might have a babysitting club, and it doesn't exist as a legal company. It's not a business. It just babysits. And the law was designed so that it could capture those sorts of people in the need to comply with child protection laws, but also deal with them if they failed to comply. So the faithful discreet slave were charged, and during the proceedings, a lawyer for the Watchtower Society made a startling announcement. And she stated that the faithful and discreet slave class are a theological arrangement.
That's it. Mm-hmm. That was the
change.
Mm-hmm.
That was the change. They actually stated in court, for the record, the faithful discreet slave do not exist. Mm-hmm. They're just a theological arrangement. Like a marital arrangement, doesn't really exist. But the thing was, and the thing is, the faithful and discreet slave did exist. So what happened was effectively the entire slave class was killed off in one giant stroke. They no longer existed around the world. There was no members of the anointed class who were members of the faithful discreet slave class. It just came down to the governing body. And that was announced in 2012. It made it into the Watchtower magazine in 2013. And it's now a part of the accepted beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. And you're responsible too for this. That's how they were going to beat you back. And but we won't accuse you of murder. I mean,
no. Yeah, killing them off, yes.
Yeah. They're still hanging in.
Yeah, they're hanging in there. Another thing that happened during the court proceedings was the Watchtower magazine came out that stated apostates are mentally diseased. And if you go near them, you'll catch their disease and you'll die. Now, as I was prosecuting a case at the time, I found it offensive that those comments were applied to me as a former member of the religion, because I had to resign as a Jehovah's Witness to do the prosecution. Otherwise, there would be a conflict of interest. So I couldn't really be a part of the organisation that was prosecuting myself. That's not possible. I then lodged a human rights complaint with our Human Rights Tribunal against stating that apostates were mentally diseased. And we spent years in court battling that very subject.
Mhm.
And the last proceeding in court, the Watchtower Society stated to the court, to the Human Rights Tribunal judge, that Stephen Unthank is not an apostate. And neither is his website, JW Leaks, an apostate website, and neither were my Facebook pages. So what that meant was that because they had to, and also the elders also stated from the local congregation near where I lived that I was not an apostate and that the Jehovah's Witnesses do not view me as one. So what that meant was that was the only thing they had left that they could pull out of their little bag to try and get out of the human rights case. By stating that I was not an apostate, then the claim that apostates are mentally diseased did not apply to me. So what happened was we both went into the courtroom effectively calling each other apostate, and
The irony.
they complained that I called them apostate. I stated that they were apostates, and they backed down and agreed that I was not an apostate, but they still stayed the apostate. It doesn't mean anything because, you know, he who controls the money controls the words and the definitions of that. But that's what happened there. That case ran for several years, and it overlapped with a lot of other activities I was doing. In the same time, we had another Parliament inquiry called the Inquiry into the Handling of Child Abuse by Religious and Other Non-Government Organisations. So I made extensive submissions to that Parliament inquiry about the Jehovah's Witnesses, about their non-compliance with child protection laws. I appeared before Parliament, and so too did members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, including a child. And these people explained to the politicians and all those assembled, including members of the police force, about the lawlessness within the Jehovah's Witness religion and about the failure of child protection laws. And that was really interesting because there was a child that was there talking about it. And I found that really encouraging that people within the religion were standing up for that exact purpose for child protection. It continued to overlap with a few other matters. At the same time, I was lobbying politicians to hold a royal commission.
Oh, this is news for most people. They didn't shows them what was leading up to this famous hearing that
yes,
XPWs used to advantage to show how what violators they are of the human rights, specifically children.
Yeah, it was very interesting, the Royal Commission. It came about after extensive lobbying by myself and some other politicians. One politician in particular, I remember Senator David Shoebridge. He was really pushing to get a Royal Commission in Australia. This was in 2012. And when I found out that he was doing that, I wrote to him a letter about the need to investigate the Jehovah's Witnesses and other religions. And it's still on the official government or his official government website today. And we got the Royal Commission. Prime Minister Julia Gillard announced that she would have one. And the Parliament inquiry that I was involved in, they dealt with the Prime Minister and decided that the two separate inquiries wouldn't conflict with each other, that they could complement each other. And that's how the Australian Royal Commission came about, a series of steps. I commenced lobbying to make sure that the Jehovah's Witnesses were involved. I'd lobbied the Prime Minister, and then at the time they set up the first phone number for the Royal Commission, and there was one person employed, and that person was a solicitor. So that was the first person I started dealing with to get the Jehovah's Witnesses involved. And that meant making sure that the terms of reference would cover the Jehovah's Witness religion. So the terms of reference and the title of the Royal Commission, it was not the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sexual Abuse, but it was the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses. The institution didn't necessarily have to cause the child abuse, but did it get involved in it? Did it respond? So I contributed to the terms of reference, and then once that was all done, the name was finalised. I then started lobbying to get the Jehovah's Witnesses included. I dealt directly with the Royal Commission and their staff, and then a bit later on I dealt with no more lawyers. My argument at the time was that the Jehovah's Witnesses take control of and micromanage child abuse investigations in the religion. So the terms of reference include them because you're looking into their responses. I, in all honesty, expected there would be a couple of hundred cases that the Jehovah's Witnesses would have on file. I was not expecting over 1,000 alleged perpetrators and over 1,800 child abuse victims. I found those statistics shocking. Granted, there was a lot of it was familial abuse, but the religion, or as Justice McClellan said, the religion took control of these. The religion made it their own. It becomes institutional abuse when the religion gets involved in it.
And the government was able to get all those documents right from the branch. And
they were, yes. There was a couple of key congregations that we wanted to get involved in the Royal Commission. One was the Mariba congregation, and that became part of the case study. The reason for that is my father used to be in that congregation, and I knew about child abuse allegations within that congregation from him. And when the elders of that congregation eventually appeared before the Royal Commission to answer questions, it was quite ironic for me to see that these were my father's friends. And my father was still a Jehovah's Witness at the time and still considered these men to be his friend. We were very successful in working out a strategy to make sure that the Royal Commission obtained all the information on the Jehovah's Witnesses. I believe in total I provided approximately, I think it was 6,800 pages of documentation on the religion and its history, beliefs, practices, internal letters. And the Royal Commission was able to subpoena from the Jehovah's Witnesses about 5,000 additional pages of documents. So I had meetings with the Royal Commission with regards to what would be investigated, how it could go about. One of the first things that one of the first things that happened was discussions in relation to Jeffrey Jackson. And what it was many years ago, there was a very big child abuse incident in Australia. And a member of the British Branch Committee, who was an Australian, suddenly decided that they needed to fly over to Australia to spend some time with their sick, dying dad. And we looked at that situation and felt that that was a strategy that the Jehovah's Witnesses could use again in relation to Jeffrey Jackson. When I appeared in Parliament in Victoria, the Jehovah's Witnesses were required to also appear and answer questions in relation to what I presented. And we monitored that situation, and we found that just before the Jehovah's Witnesses appeared in the Victorian Parliament in 2013, Jeffrey Jackson flew over to Australia. And from my sources, he was heavily involved in micromanaging this particular inquiry. So in 2012 and again in 2013, extensive information on Jeffrey Jackson was presented to the Royal Commission, and some discussions were had with people about what could be expected to take place if the Jehovah's Witnesses were part of a case study. It was anticipated that Jeffrey Jackson would fly to Australia to visit his ailing dad, as a pretext to come in and micromanage the entire Royal Commission. And lo and behold, Jeffrey Jackson did fly into Australia to visit his elderly father who was not well at the time. And the Royal Commission was expecting him. They knew he was in the country. And they issued a subpoena for his appearance before the Royal Commission to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of that is history, because
his words hung him.
It really did. And it's very good if people can go back, and I am working on a video with Samantha about this very subject, but one thing that's worth considering with, well, a video documentary with Jeffrey Jackson, if you look at the very end of him being interviewed by Justice McClellan, Jeffrey Jackson explains to the Royal Commission that that's why he volunteered to appear. He didn't volunteer. He was subpoenaed. He was not allowed to leave the country.
It's such a shame if the half-truths that they do.
Well, this was more than a half-truth. This was an
Yes.
outright lie. And if you watch carefully to the video, which there are copies of it out there, you can see that Justice McClellan is furious in that. And he reminds Jeffrey Jackson that he was under subpoena. And he says to him words to the effect, "You are released from your subpoena," thereby putting a member of the faithful and discreet slave who just lied on public record in his place. Called him out for what he was.
So glad you brought that
as
out.
As a justice could. A very important thing. The way the Royal Commission operated, one thing that a lot of people were disappointed about, and I've read a lot of comments about this, was there was no potential slam dunk moment. There was no shoving the religion through the hoop and bringing them down or anything like that, because it was a Royal Commission about fact finding, not one about scoring points against different elders there or humiliating the religion. A lot of people may not have realised that the questioning was all on a scale of hierarchy. The higher up you were in the organisation, the more powerful, the more important the questions were. The important questions were saved for Jeffrey Jackson, and then prior to that for Terence O'Brien and the lawyer Vincent Toole. They were asked questions in the hierarchy scale. But one thing that the Royal Commission did was they, except for questions on the fly, there were no questions that were asked that they did not already have the answer to. It wasn't about disproving them. For example, Vincent Toole, it was time to question him about theocratic warfare. And he stated that he heard of it, he knew it was in some old magazines, that was before his time, but he's not familiar with it. Vincent Toole has been representing for the previous 10 years his clients who have been accused of engaging in theocratic warfare. There's document transcripts that are not in public domain where that subject is discussed. And yet suddenly he appears before the Royal Commission and he has no knowledge of it whatsoever. That's all the Royal Commission needed to hear. They just needed to hear that someone that they had evidence of knowing about theocratic warfare was going to engage in it and lie.
Short-term memory.
Yep. The Royal Commission knew that Jeffrey Jackson had assisted in raising an orphan child when she was younger. And the Royal Commission knew about the old songbooks where it talks about using the rod to discipline children. And they had the information on corporal punishment and the Watchtower and Awake articles where it states that this is a physical rod. So all the Royal Commission did was and I know that because I went through it with them in a meeting, they asked Jeffrey Jackson about corporal punishment and he said he wouldn't personally do it. Well, here's an interesting thing, because the faithful and discreet slave has instructed him that he must use the rod.
Isn't that interesting? You know, when you're just reading it or hearing about it, you don't think about all of these points that you're making. That's why it's so important that people hear this. Yeah, this wasn't just thrown together. This was carefully done to see what the Watchtower would say, how they would respond.
We had some very good points in there. In the Parliament inquiry in Victoria that I attended, we presented to the politicians extensive records on people involved in allegations of child abuse that were elders and ministerial servants within the religion. The Jehovah's Witnesses were asked to appear, and Terence O'Brien, director of Watchtower and on the branch committee, was asked in Parliament how many cases of child abuse has there been in the state of Victoria. And he went on record and stated that he was anticipating that question. So he had the staff at Bethel go through the records, and they've only found 2 cases.
Huh.
2 cases.
2 cases.
I was able to use that information and show to the Royal Commission that there were more than 2 cases. But more importantly, when the Parliament in Victoria did not have the power to subpoena records, it was a Parliament inquiry. So the Jehovah's Witnesses knew that the politicians would never be able to access the child abuse database and carry out an investigation. So they said 2. When the Royal Commission subpoenaed the documents, they found 132, including elders, ministerial servants, pioneers. And this was not just familial, this was within the religion itself, and numerous people being disfellowshipped, way more than the numbers the Jehovah's Witnesses put forth. So in effect, what they did was they lied 130 times to the Victorian government because they knew they would not be discovered, they would not be held account.
Yes, yes. Well, we're holding them account. They think this is long past, but how many times you read on the computer when you're going from ex-witness to ex-witness that they say they left because of the Royal Commission?
Yes,
I did.
Isn't that some people? I'll sure ask you about that. So Stephen, we've been through the Royal Commission. We also, in 2014, which was the year before that, there was a legal action against the state of Victoria over the use of public buildings by Jehovah's Witnesses that resulted in a ban for conventions. That was very unusual, and we don't have too much time because we got so many more years to go, and you guys are really, really working hard and putting in all kinds of time on what you're doing presently. So that was a plus, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is something that's worth considering too. In 2014, the Jehovah's Witnesses had the International Convention in Melbourne. They were in a predicament following the convention because they used to hold all their assemblies at the Melbourne Tennis Centre, the Rod Laver Arena. But legal action was commenced against the state government and the tennis centre in relation to the Jehovah's Witnesses' use of the tennis facilities, the conventions. And the Jehovah's Witnesses were not involved. They know nothing about it. They can't even access the court documents. But what it was is that the Jehovah's Witnesses were breaching all of the occupational health and safety laws and all of the laws and policies and procedures put in place that they agreed to with the state government. So in a courtroom, bit by bit, we went through the childminding services that they were using. The people did not have working with children cards. The attendants that they used for security and crowd control did not have licenses. The traffic control operators did not have traffic control certification. The people in the first aid department did not have first aid certificates.
Calling them accountable for what they
and
did
this
have.
yeah, and this made the government liable, and the government was liable for that. And the government effectively blacklisted the religion. And that is why after the Melbourne International Convention in 2014, a decision was made by the branch committee to have all assemblies at the Melbourne Assembly Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. There would no longer be big conventions. So every weekend for month after month, all of the big conventions were held at their little assembly hall. And the reason given was that it was the cost of travel and it would be easier for the Jehovah's Witnesses. No, they couldn't get a facility anymore because they were not complying with the law. Just a law unto themselves.
True to this day?
True to this very day. They're still holding at the Melbourne Assembly Hall. They're not welcome anywhere except the Etihad Stadium, which occurred in 2014. That's now called the Marvel Stadium, which was their convention in 2019. And that's now owned by the AFL, the Australian Football League. The Jehovah's Witnesses there got into trouble as well in their stadium in the 2014 one by WorkSafe Victoria, who had to walk in and take control of the event because the Jehovah's Witnesses were operating it outside of the law. And it was just, for example, it was in little things like everybody who does volunteer work had to go through an induction program for safety reasons. But to do the induction program, you had to be 16 years of age and over. Yet the media were reporting children as young as 10 cleaning seats. So how did the children get into this work site to clean seats?
Oh,
Well, they got in because the Jehovah's Witnesses didn't comply with the health and safety laws. They had also failed to comply with first aid. So the state government of Victoria effectively took control of the assembly to make sure it happened, wrested it out of the control of the Jehovah's Witnesses and did the management, and then left the Jehovah's Witnesses with a bill, I think was around $200,000. They were stuck with a bill. And once everyone got back to their congregations, a letter was sent out that there was some unexpected costs associated with the convention, including damage to the grass. Yeah, there was a couple of $100 worth of damage to the grass, but it wasn't $200,000. They passed the plate around and got all the brothers and sisters to pay for their own mismanagement.
you know, you really have to commend the government there. The witnesses are so quick to condemn governments. In this case,
They are.
this is a commendation to the government, which is doing this to protect the people. Is that they just want to make trouble for the attenders? If they don't put into practice these rules and laws, you have accidents, you have all sorts of problems, like the food service, which eventually stopped at conventions because people were getting sick. That because it was being they weren't doing the right thing as far as safety for food, and so it's not the condemnation. You know, if they would just straighten out this whole thing, which they tried with the no food anymore, so you could give them commendation, and that's what I've always argued. They're so quick to condemn everybody else, but they don't follow that. They follow a procedure of missing the boat. It seems like is it leadership? Is it leadership? It couldn't be that they're stupid. Could it be? I don't know. You know, I could say a lot, but I'm not gonna. You dealt with it. You dealt with them. I met intelligent people at Bethel. I just don't understand this kind of thing.
One thing to keep in mind, though, this is with the courts in the state of Victoria, Australia, and with the government, they were protecting the Jehovah's Witnesses from the religious leaders. They were not They was not acting on false information from disgruntled former members or apostates or anybody else. The government had to step in and protect the individual Jehovah's Witnesses and their children from the branch committee, from the Watchtower Society, from the governing body, and from the lawless actions of the faithful and discreet slave. Over and over again, for the last 10 or 12 years, our government has had to step in to protect these people from these crazy men in charge.
Good point. Good point. I'm telling you. Well, we've heard a lot about this, and so we're through 2017, and we want to move on. And I'm going to tell you, what I did in 2018 was because of you. It was because of I learned a lot from you. You went ahead and you took the bull by the horns, and you just did things like Samantha's doing. And but it took me a while, and most of the times years ago, the ex-witnesses were not, there was exceptions to the rule, like Richard Rye, who would make life miserable for the Watchtower. And so at the headquarters, they painted him as the biggest, worst organizer, apostate ever in the whole world. And he was just one man. So, so what happened in 2017, 2018, learning from you, I decided to stir up things. And I knew and was listening to, because Pennsylvania is where the organization was born, and New York is where they inhabit their headquarters. And New York, a Pennsylvania corporation, physically is in New York, up at Wallkill. So it's, but it really is a Pennsylvania corporation and still is. It's registered in New York as a foreign corporation, by the way. So I decided to write a submission, a legal submission, and ask for a grand jury, a trial, do what I can do. And it was an amazing thing, and told you about it. I did a lot of writing, and you had all the experience, although I can type, and I was an office person for years and years, but to do the kind of thing with government, you were already accustomed to it. So when I finished all of the material I wanted to cover, to introduce the officials in Pennsylvania about the true picture of Jehovah's Witnesses, I sent everything to you. And you did a fantastic job. You added, you subtracted, you put it, it looked so professional. And I was
the first thing I did was I just shook my head. I'm like, you can't send this to the government. This is Barbara Anderson expressing all of her emotions and thoughts and frustration and everything like that. And it was really good because it carried your story through the whole thing. But there was one thing, though, that was very, very important in the whole matter. And that was a document that had come from a case that Zolkin Law Firm was involved in. And in there,
I was involved with them since 2000, I don't know, 7, 8. Yeah. So I was learning.
Yes. And in this document, I'm just pulling it up right now, there was mentioned in there during the proceedings, I think it was Devon's story for Zolkin Law Firm and the court. And there was an exchange on accessing the list of elders that were known to be child molesters, that were appointed to their positions by Watchtower, New York. And this was in relation to a letter that had been sent out, I think it was in 1997.
That's right.
And it was interesting because these perpetrators were given the pseudonym P1, P2, P3, which was actually quite interesting that the court gave them that name. But the exchange went like this. The judge said, how many were there, by the way? How many Ps? And Mr. Story, do you know the number? And for the Jehovah's Witnesses, they responded that they don't know offhand, but roughly, go on, say it, how many?
775.
Yes, 775 elders were appointed by Watchtower, New York, who were known to be child molesters.
That's right. What?
And nothing was done about it. They knew it.
That's right. It really was big, and still is, by the way.
Yep. So I looked at that and decided to do the history of child protection in the state of New York, write a report on that, take your information and break it up and do the history of children within the Jehovah's Witnesses, bring the whole thing together, do the research. Took me about 4 months full time. Actually, I think you gave it to me in October 2017. It took until May 2018 to get it together. We devised a plan to lodge the complaint with the New York Attorney General. but at the last second, just as we were preparing to lodge it, the Attorney General had been dismissed.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And there was no Attorney General to address it to. So we had to embark on a massive 72 hours research of New York legislation to find out who is in charge.
That's
and
right.
It turned out that the New York State Legislature was in charge until the new Attorney General was appointed. So that's who we had to write that to. But there were no forms because there was no proper forms. It was all addressed to the previous Attorney General. So we had to alter the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
It was lodged on May the 14th, 2018, and then it was with New York, and then immediately the plan was launched of getting it into the hands of the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office.
New York never went that far in New York. I kind of think behind the scenes that the New York recommended this to Pennsylvania because we said it was being sent to both places. And at the time, New York was having a difficult time because they didn't have a person in the position of authority. But we had sent both of the documents. They were identical to both places. It was there a few weeks in Pennsylvania, and I received a phone call, and they wanted to know when their agents could visit. Well, that was a wonderful surprise. And to this day, I have the card from the agent who was, he was special agent of the Bureau of Criminal Investigations in Pittsburgh, PA. And that man is such a kind man. And he dealt with the Catholic Church investigation. So the other agent, there was also a woman agent that we dealt with. She came here with the man, and they had so much experience from having a grand jury look into the Catholic Church before. So it was 5 years. So these same people got all their experience rooting out all the mischief in the Catholic Church. See, and so then they turn their attention. So what else do you want to say about that?
Well, we spent a lot of time, and credit where credit's due. You did, Barbara, and a few other people assisted in helping the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office get the investigation going. That included meeting with people. In March 2019, I flew to the US for meetings with them.
You came to visit us.
Yes, I visited you as well. Yes, which was great. And we really worked hard to get that grand jury happening.
And we went to Pennsylvania, and there were wonderful ex-JWs, a few of them that were fabulous, who were ex-elders, and they worked closely because they were in the area, and they worked closely with these agents. So what came out of all of this was the grand jury, and it's still looking into it to this day. The investigation still goes on. I had 14 arrests. And the woman who is who replaced Shapiro in this, he's a governor now in Pennsylvania, and her background is child abuse, dealing with child abuse as an attorney and also in government. So she knows her stuff. So it was a heady time for us to see how they responded. And this is the worldly people that we had no regard for. We were taught not to have any confidence in them. And apparently they love children. They did the right thing. And many across the country are doing the right thing. But we're all still working on this. So now you've had so many things you've done. And in 2018, you traveled through Europe, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
you were meeting with government and non-governmental organizations. and there was a convention, London JW protest at the Be Courageous convention. This is where Samantha comes into this picture. And tell us where you were when this protest was going on, Samantha. Thank you, Stephen. We're not finished with you yet, but don't
Okay.
go away.
Well, in 2018, I was still very much in. So I would have been attending that convention. And I do remember there being quite a number of people that had left the organization protesting. And I've told Stephen that at the time, I just looked at them with pity. You know, I thought I was in the right place. I thought they'd left Jehovah, they'd left the organization. Look at the state of them. Because they were a colorful bunch. I'm not gonna deny that, especially from a witness's. You know, I'm fourth generation witness. I was born and bred into it. So my thinking was, of course, like any person who's grown up as a witness, your thinking is very arrogant and prideful. You're saved. You're special. Everybody else
That's
who's
right.
outside is worldly and they've lost their way. So yeah. So how we've laughed about it with Stephen. That I had no idea he was there. I had no idea that his activities in Australia were something that I then came across probably a year later, and started to draw some conclusions about where I was and what I was involved in and whether I wanted to actually be associated anymore.
Well, keep going on. I don't know the questions too many to ask you because I don't know you that well. So there was Speaker's Corner, Hyde Park, London. What has that got to do with this?
Well, it was a trip when I was in London. I was with Lara Kaput at the time there, and we went to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park and read out Case Study 29 from the Royal Commission into Jehovah's Witnesses. The Speaker's Corner allows people to get up and do whatever they want, talk about any subject. So we set up an Australian flag, pulled out the entire volume for the Royal Commission and read it out in public. Very interesting.
A meeting with the Charity Commission for England and Wales went on. In France, you met with Miveludes. I'm not a French speaker, of course, so I don't say that right. But I met with them when I was, that's the anti-cult organization. It's a government. It works from, it is a government agency, or it was. And I understand that they have done some changes with it, but it still exists. And that was, you met with them to help them understand the child abuse, but they're anti-cult organization. Yeah. So we had marvelous meetings in 2009 with the representatives of this organization. There was a man there who was, I gave a short talk to about 20 people with the organization, and one man who came was a government representative of the Board of Education of France. And his question to me was, why don't intelligent in school, because he had been a professor or something like that, and he said, why do Jehovah's Witnesses children, they when I used to mention going on to a university, they wouldn't do it. So I had to explain in front of all the other people how Jehovah's Witnesses felt and discouraged higher education. So that was 2018. So we've got Samantha on the outside. She's kind of looking in because she saw all these protesters, and Stephen is doing his thing. Then you have invitation from the Prime Minister and Attorney General to national apology at Parliament House in 2018. Stephen.
Yes, it was a very big event. The Australian government was apologising to institutional child abuse survivors. Interestingly, the Jehovah's Witnesses refused to apologise, but the Australian government decided to say sorry. And I was invited by the Prime Minister and Attorney General. I did a big article on it on the saysorry.org website. What was interesting about the event was that afterwards, a group of survivors, myself included, we were having lunch outside Parliament, and we got to see Justice McClellan walk past, the presiding justice of the Royal Commission. So I jumped up and I raced over to him, and I recognised at that time that it was his last official engagement with the Royal Commission. It was over. It was like the finish of it. And he was at the edge of the entire grounds with his wife walking towards the car park area. And I went over to him and I introduced myself and said who we were, the survivors from the Jehovah's Witnesses, and could he spare some time to talk to us. And I acknowledged that it was probably his last engagement. And he was very kind to us and allowed us to spend some time and to get some photos with him and to meet him. And we also got to meet his wife and thank her for lending him to the Royal Commission. And Justice McClellan then posed for a series of photos with a whole lot of us. And there was one photo that really, a couple of them that really captured the moment. Someone asked Justice McClellan, what was it like dealing with the Jehovah's Witnesses? And he didn't say anything. He just went like this. That thing of like so frustrating. And that was the photo. We got the photo of him being frustrated. And that was really wonderful to get a chance to meet him. We received little, like a show bag with the official apology on it from the government there, and got to meet with a lot of people. So that was really wonderful. And then went back to Victoria and invited to meet the governor of Victoria straight after that. So that was quite good there.
Yeah. So you make all these efforts to do the right thing, and at the same time you really enjoy the benefits of it, because it is so fascinating to see government work when you get involved with it. Of course, there's some problems in government. It always is, because there's problems with people. What are you going to do? But to see it work with a good constitution is a wonderful thing. So you had your rewards. These are considered rewards to people like us.
Well, I can give you an example of what I consider rewards. When I was in Pennsylvania, I met with quite a number of politicians, and one of the things we discussed was getting a window opened for child abuse survivors to make claims against institutions, open up a redress window for them. So I met with a number of politicians, we devised a strategy, we got it through, and that took place. The Pennsylvanian government decided to open up a redress window for people up to the age of 55, remove the statute of limitations, and allow them to make a claim. And we were successful. We got that done. So to me, that's a great victory there. The other great victory that I view is when I was in California, I became aware that a group of senators were trying to establish a mental health system for young people. And they were seeking around 137, I think, million US dollars to develop this program, which is a staggering amount of money for one state. But they were modelling it on the Headspace program that's in Australia. And when I saw that, I decided that I would get involved, and I appeared before the Californian Senate and presented to them the benefits of the Headspace program for young people in providing them with mental health services. And they've started adopting a lot of the recommendations that was put forward by a lot of the people there. So that, to me, is one of the benefits. This is nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's right.
But this is to do with young people getting mental health counselling. To play a part in that it's a real reward.
Well, if more of us would get involved, we'd have better care. We'd have better effects from our government. You did go to, when you were here, you went out to California. You were involved in some things out there with TV and interesting. And then now in 2019, and this is all 2019, you're meeting with the Commission for Children and Young People to discuss ongoing concerns regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. 2019, Melbourne International Convention, Love Never Shuns protest. Okay?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you ever get rest? Hey, where did you get any money for all of this? I mean, you're a working man. What'd you do? How did you manage?
For the first 10 years, I funded my work myself. In 2008, I joined up with Lara Kaput, and she put in a lot of her time and resources into keeping our activism going. And then that went for quite a while. COVID sort of stopped that. We did some more work recently for that. But on the whole, it's apart from Lara's involvement, my involvement, and a few other people that we've worked with, like yourself, Barbara. When I visited you, you were able to help with accommodation. That's sort of been roughly what it is. I think in donations from or contributions from, say, the ex-JW community over the last 12 years, I think it's been about maybe $3,000, maybe runs at about probably enough to buy me a cup of coffee each week.
Well, it takes you a good week or so, from what I recall, when you were writing up things for government, and you weren't working then, or you would do a night shift or something for work or days or whatever. You're not, I hate to tell you this, but I know from experience that you're getting older, and so you're not piling up the money for your when you retire. And we have Social Security here, and the more you put in, the more you get out and have a comfortable retirement. Since we don't kind of agree with the Watchtower about living forever and God's going to take care of us forever, it isn't easy for you. And I know, because sometimes when I write to you about something or other, asking your advice or telling you something, you're out on a farm or something, and you're doing the work with hay. I'm not a farmer, I don't know the terminology. So I got to commend you. You're determined, and your activity has turned out to be a plus. And plus the fact that you have a feeling of being useful, that you are here on this earth and you're useful to your fellow human beings. And I think that that's satisfaction, so the Bible says about, a lot of people believe in that, and they said, love your neighbor as yourself. So we got self-love, so you're going to have something to retire on. So you got to do some more work. But you're showing so much neighbor love. It's such an important arena. Now, something happened to you was outstanding in 2019, and that one, amazing. You received the highest state government award for volunteers, the Premier's Volunteer Champions Award for Impact. It was presented to you by the governor at a large ceremony in Government House. Now, that was worth it all, wasn't it? Or was it? Well, tell me.
It was great to receive that honour. You had mentioned that you wanted to bring this up, so I wore, this is the little gold pin that the government presented me, and there's some certificates as well and letters of thanks. The award, the irony of the award was, it was the Premier of Victoria and the Governor of Victoria that issued the award on behalf of the state. It was for my volunteer work in taking on the Jehovah's Witness religion.
Mm-hmm.
in protecting the individual members from the leaders,
And they
in
should
the
thank
child
you.
protection.
They really
And
should.
for a decade of work in doing that, they thanked me. In the speech that was read out in Government House, it said that Stephen holds institutions accountable for protecting children. In 2008, Stephen commenced action in the Magistrates Court of Victoria to force organisations to comply with Working with Children Check laws. Since then, he has continued to work with families and the government to strengthen child protection laws, and is now sought after internationally as an expert on institutional culture that adversely affects child safety. Thanks to Stephen's work, more than 150 small organisations, they're actually congregations, and 2,000 volunteers, they're actually elders, working with children in the community now comply with Working with Children Check requirements. So the Victorian government acknowledged the work that I'd done to get the Jehovah's Witnesses to comply with mandatory child protection laws, and that I paid for that myself, and that I volunteered years of my time.
And you never asked for a dime. Never, ever.
No.
There's so many people that try to make money off. That's why I bring this up, because it's very annoying. If you can't get involved in this work and pay your own way, then don't do it. I mean, it's okay to accept a donation. It's helpful, but and there are people with an open heart and an open pocketbook that certainly do help. But to go into it to make money, I know of one man who actually gets paid a monthly salary by a rich witness, so he can be a activist. And that's his affair and that's his business. But he's not an expert. And we've known that from some of the things he has said publicly and in the newspaper, where he was 100% wrong, and we never said a word because we couldn't. And we can't say to Watchtower or let them know that we have some people that don't know what they're talking about. And
that
so
is a tough one. That I remember. You mentioned earlier that I was in California. I did a TV interview there. We had done a program for Hearst Communications, and it was quite a big one. It was 4 episodes or four-part documentary that was shown, and it was dealing with the Jehovah's Witnesses. There was a lot of people there. Roger Bentley played a good part in there. Cameron was there. Candace Conti was involved.
Wonderful.
A lot of other people flew in from around America to be interviewed. The people interviewed were survivors of institutional abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses, plus a key elder that was involved in the matter, which was Roger.
Mm-hmm.
And we were attacked. The program and the producers were attacked for the program, not by the Jehovah's Witnesses, but by activists inside the XJW community. That weren't interviewed. They wanted to be a part of it. They made complaints to the executive board of directors of Hearst.
I got a phone call from communications man and of Hearst. Hearst is the largest media company in the world. It's larger than all 3, ABC, NBC, and CBS in the United States. They own so many media stations everywhere. And I get a phone call. And the man, the correspondent said, "Who is this person?" And he gives me a name. And he said, "You know him?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he says, "Well, he blessed us out. He said he called here and got the highest person he could talk to at Hearst, and then told him what nerve they had not asking him to be involved in the Hearst, what they were doing to put these programs together." I talked to this man for over a year behind the scenes on the phone, introducing him to how the Watchtower beliefs affect people. And I didn't care I wasn't on the program, and I didn't ask for money. I'm not giving myself credit here. It's just the way it should be. And but I mean, if somebody was going to donate money to me, if I was traveling out there, and I'm on a fixed income on Social Security, I would have taken it. But I wasn't involved in this program. I turned the program down out in California. I turned the Leah Remini program down because they wanted me to be out there so badly. I said, no, I wouldn't be, because ethically, I was not going to sit next to a man that I thought was I don't even want to say it, unethical in his work, and who portrays himself as the best historian in the world on Jehovah's Witnesses. We have this other one who wasn't even an elder ever, and he's an expert on the elder. You are an expert on all of this, and you don't ever ask for anything. And that's why you were one of those folk I had to get here. I had to talk to you. I had to people to know, because look, they can do this too. They can get involved. Everybody can put a little bit of effort in this and be useful. And we don't have to be celebrities or things like that. We're information people.
It's not always about the people. It's about the wider picture. You mentioned that you didn't want to be involved in the Hearst program and you left it for other people. A couple of years ago, Lara Kaput and myself pitched an idea to ABC Australia, to Four
Bearing
Corners.
Witness, right?
Yeah, we wanted them to do a documentary on the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they did that. The ABC News Four Corners program did the program Bearing Witness, which the full title, I better read this, Escaping Jehovah's Witnesses Inside the Dangerous World of a Brutal Religion. That came out during COVID in 2021. I looked at it yesterday on YouTube, and they're up to 7.4 million views.
Isn't that fantastic?
That's that is a lot of people, considering Australia is only 25, I think, going on for 26 million people, to have that many views, and it's climbing. I got to meet recently one of the reporters from ABC, and she stated that it was one of their most successful documentaries on the Four Corners program. And for people that don't know Four Corners, it's one of the world's oldest, longest running and most respected news documentary programs.
Owned by?
Australian Broadcasting Corporation, a public company. So
Yes.
it doesn't make money off commercials. So
Yes.
there's no need for sensationalism or anything like that. But in putting the project together, Lara and myself didn't play an active part in being interviewed. It wasn't about us, it was the story.
That's right.
We provided information, we met with the reporters, we got a lot of people together to be interviewed, and it was successful in getting that done. And that's what it means to do activism or even advocacy work. It's not about getting your face or your name on something.
That's right.
It's about getting the information out there. Granted, many times, too many times, I've been on television or radio or in the media, and I don't want that. Generally, in at least maybe 70% of the cases, the person who's meant to give the interview pulls out at the last minute. And then that means I'm the one that's interviewed. And then because I was interviewed there, a newspaper wants to speak to me about the interview I gave on television, and then it snowballs. And I'm happy to work behind the scenes.
We've got oodles more of information. And of course, Samantha has a lot of interesting things that I want to hear about, and I really want everybody else to. You appeared before the Government Review Committee to give evidence in relation to mandatory child abuse reporting laws in 2022. There was legislative change recommendations relating to a Commonwealth National Redress Scheme, which we're going to talk about, to improve the protection of applicants, namely survivors of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Who would think that you'd need something like that? But you do. Then you go to Germany, and you appear before the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in Germany. How many acres of hay did you have to shove around to pay for that trip? Then no, I'm not saying this. I'm not asking people to give you money. I'm just telling the reality. The reality of being an advocate. There's a lot of money in it. It's all yours. I used to say that about Jehovah's Witnesses. I said, there's a lot of money in this work, and it's all mine. Our car, our gas going door to door, our clothes going, that kind of thing. Well, we've switched sides, and now we have to put other monies. But that's okay. Many of the media do pay for specific things. I mean, they'll pay for your way out there. If I wanted to be on the Leah Remedy, I would have had my airfare, my hotel. No. There was other reasons not to do things if it isn't going to put our work. The work is the most important thing. The kids, the protection. I got to say, if I had been molested, the stories I've heard over the years, hundreds and hundreds of them, I just cringe what have been done to JW kids. Cringe just what was done to you, Stephen, which you've never really talked about, by a high official at Watchtower in 1980 when you were 12 years old. What was done to you, the guy should have been shot. No, I take that back. That's mean. But this is ridiculous. And they covered it up and been covering it up all these years, although the government has acknowledged it. And no, it was for real. You had enough proof of what happened to you. And so you've been so busy. The German documentary, I understand. What did they tell you about afterwards? And that was last July when we got it in English. And they said it was what was it? The viewing audience it was late at night, had the largest viewing audience of a documentary.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, for the German documentary there, which was hopefully there'll be a follow-up. There was the production crew shot extra footage and discussed a few extra subjects, particularly on the financial dealings of the Jehovah's Witnesses between Germany and Britain and Africa.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we have then in 23, which is, we're coming up to almost presently, meeting at International Labour Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, to discuss the historical use of children as workers by the Watchtower Society, which they deny. And all of us know that that is a lie. That children do work and have worked for years, used by the Watchtower Society. Then you had prepared an extensive stakeholders report on the submission of the Jehovah's Witnesses to the New Zealand High Court to stop the New Zealand Royal Commission from investigating the JWs. They didn't want to be investigated. They did everything to stop it. You were there. You presented the information, and they had the investigation, right?
Yep. There's no final result there, but
yep. That's recent.
I'm of the understanding that the Royal Commission is removing a lot of the references for the Jehovah's Witnesses. Their report won't be published in time, or the results of the court won't be out in time for the report to be published. So the Jehovah's Witnesses win. They get to suppress information regarding themselves. They failed in Germany. They failed to get the German Commission to remove information. In Germany, they made effectively a fundamental mistake when the German Commission announced that it was winding up and that it was ending in December. The Jehovah's Witnesses and their external consulting groups, or their hired lobbyists, launched an attack on the German Commission, and published a lot of information, a lot of disinformation about it, and criticised it, and then went to the OSCE to try and get the German government to shut down child abuse investigations into Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany. Then the Commission announced that it was going to extend for another year.
Oh, wonderful.
So, oops, for Watchtower and the Office of Public Information. But good news for us, because then both myself and Lara Kaput were able to fly to Germany and appear before the Commission and give them a lot more evidence in relation to the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes. And that's the most important thing, being there and getting information, true information, not the information that the Watchtower representatives who work for PID, Public Information Department of Bethel, and feed the parliaments a bunch of baloney. And these men go to these parliaments and the different countries, and they lie. And they look good. They dress like millionaires, and they usually are perfect. The coiffure, everything just right, good speaking voice, and they don't tell the truth, but they look good. I venture to say that nowadays they're going to, as they go about this, because they're lobbying all over Europe. We can talk all about us lobbying. I bet the lobbyist men now who go to the parliament and talk to the people wear beards. That looks good, right? So now that's a modern thing, and they do that. So, oh, you can't hear? Oh, nuts. What happened?
I don't know.
I hear you now. We hear you.
Okay, I'm back. I just want to make one comment on the lobbying. The Jehovah's Witnesses have a frequently asked questions section on their website, which is really questions that they ask themselves and provide the answers to themselves. But they state that they don't engage in political lobbying. Well, that's very misleading, because they hire outside entities and companies and persons to do the lobbying for them. So the people that go in and actively lobby are not Jehovah's Witnesses, they're hired lobbyists. And they do that. It's just a play on words. Jehovah's Witnesses meaning what they could simply say, the Jehovah's Witness organization does not engage in any lobbying. No, they just state Jehovah's Witnesses do not lobby. And they hire people.
Misleading, half-truths, omission. Okay, so nowadays, you're all did I miss something? No, I don't think so. The redress scheme. You appeared before the Australian Parliament Joint Standing Committee on the National Redress Scheme. That was last year. And that you're working on. Now we have to, because of time, and not because we wanted to hear everything Samantha had to say, but we're going to try to see how far we can get with Rick. Okay, so thank you so much, Stephen. Have we missed anything really important?
Well, I would like. There's something I'd like to mention. Samantha and myself recently produced a video. It's an animated video on the Australian National Redress Scheme. And this video was designed to assist Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia. We believe there's approximately 700 people that could make the claim. But we spent a lot of time putting that together, and we've also spent a lot of time travelling around Melbourne and the region of Victoria doing documentary footage for a lot of the discussions that we spoke about today. We did background footage, and perhaps Sam would like to talk a little bit about that.
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so this is really the first project that I've assisted Stephen in, and I was particularly pleased to do that because it is me finding out about the Australian Royal Commission and what was uncovered about the organisation and the way they responded or actually failed to respond. That really was the nail in the coffin for me waking up and leaving the organisation. But also the statistics that came out were horrendous. So this scheme is very important because there's there's, like Stephen mentioned, there's over 700 people that likely are absolutely entitled to the redress scheme. And those are just the cases that are known. So think of all the individuals that maybe never did go forward to speak to the elders, that were not known about. Lots of child abuse remains hidden, sometimes for decades. So this video is very good, and we had an opportunity to address some concerns witnesses would have, or ex-witnesses would have. You know,
The following
things
video
like
has been adapted to assist people who have experienced child sexual abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses institution in Australia, so that they can navigate and understand the National Redress Scheme. This is applying Australia, so that they can navigate and understand the saysorry.org. We thank the Australian government for copyright assistance. This video provides information on what the National Redress Scheme is, who can apply, and things to consider before applying. Watching this video could raise difficult memories and feelings.
Well, we want to make the video big.
Remember to look after your well-being. This might involve approaching someone you know and trust, or a redress support service, which can offer you help and support. Free confidential redress support services are available in all states and territories, providing emotional and practical support before, during, and after applying to the scheme.
So where is this going to show? Just on
Between 2013 and 2017, the Australian Royal Commission into
is this going to show television?
This is the video is on the JW News YouTube channel at the moment, and there's also a article that ties in on the saysorry.org website. And what's important about the video is it explains the process for Jehovah's Witnesses and former Jehovah's Witnesses in making an application for compensation under the Australian scheme. It explains what aspects of institutional abuse and the settings you could possibly fall under. And it also goes into detail about some of the disinformation that the Jehovah's Witnesses are publishing at the moment. And the reason for the disinformation is that if there's 756 potential applicants to the scheme from within Jehovah's Witness institution, if that number's correct, the average payout is $90,000 at the moment. That's an exposure to the Watchtower Society of about $68 million over the next couple of years. So one can expect the governing body to authorise anything and any sort of disinformation campaign to prevent them having to pay out this information. Part of what they've done is to spread false information that children have never been members of the congregation, that have never worked on building sites, that have never been involved in hall cleaning. In Australia during the 70s and 80s, the Jehovah's Witnesses used to provide childminding services and creches. And we also had the Theocratic Ministry School. Now the religion is denying all of those things ever occurred, because in those settings, child abuse could have occurred. And if child abuse occurred in those settings, then someone has a claim. So a lot of disinformation is being published there, not just by Jehovah's Witnesses in their statements to the government, but outside consultancy firms are also publishing disinformation on the internet.
Yes. I want to hear that about the disinformation.
Well, we've been tracking the progress. It started around about 2011 with the little statement that was made by Vincent Toole, lawyer for Watchtower Australia. He stated to the media, we don't typically work with children. Now it's evolved over a decade of we don't work with children, we never have worked with children, to effectively there has never been any children within the institution. We've never had any institutional settings. The fact of the matter is they always have, but what they did was they set up a brand new company in 2019 to deal with this situation, and it registered with the tax office as trading under the trading name Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's going out and telling people it's never done this, it's never done that. But the Jehovah's Witnesses trading name for it, that company is limited to only 20 persons. And under Australian company law, you can't be a child and be a member or director of a corporation. So effectively, they're misleading the government and the media in their statements. And they also, at the same time, claiming that there's no one entity in charge of Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, while at the same time claiming to be that one entity that is providing information on their behalf. So it's a massive disinformation campaign. The outside consultancy groups are publishing a lot of information on the internet that is outright false, and that the Jehovah's Witness leaders are then using and taking and republishing it to the government as if it's factual.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is it's a laundering process. They're filtering false information, because the Jehovah's Witnesses can't say to the government, we don't do this or we don't do that, because it's a lie. So they pay someone else to say it, then they take that quote in, and then they state, according to one scholar,
Yes.
we don't do this. According to one report, we don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's $68 million at stake here. And if the redress scheme in Australia is picked up in other countries around the world, even if it's picked up as a result of the grand jury in Pennsylvania, there may not be enough cash reserves or enough money in the religion to actually meet the payouts. So they've got to start their disinformation campaign straight away, and they've been doing that very successfully the last few years. And now we're trying to unravel it and claw back to get the real information out. And this video deals with part of that.
This is immense, and it's very sad that it's happening. But they're trying to survive. That's no excuse, but that's survival, right? But the problem is we don't have the time to go into too much more, but it's so important. You have done so much work. Your associates, a lot of associates, just not you, over the past 20, 15, whatever years. Others are there to work with you. There have been others that have worked with me. And Samantha's finding that she's making contacts with people who are out there to help. And so there are people that are trying they're XJWs, and they're trying to ruin your reputation and have been for years. And you had to go to court, and you've been dealing with a court trial for years. Finally, you won the case. It was a case. Am I correct when I use the word slander? And you've been named slandered on the internet, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of from XJWs. Why? I don't know. Maybe if they want to come here and give their side of the story, but you don't hardly know them. And if you do at all, and this is what Samantha's going to have. I did have for a while until I answered one of the men who was trying it. And I said, if you put one more word out there about my name, I will publish all the terrible things that you have done in the past years of our association. Initially, it will be there, and you will hang your head. So I've never heard another word. But in your case, you won the case in Australia, and this slanderer takes off for the United States, owes you the court amount of money that was awarded you. You'll never see it, right?
Yeah, and there was also court orders issued that the false information that was published has to be removed from the internet, and no further information is allowed to be published about me. And this hasn't stopped. It's still being done. And the court was very, very clear that each time, if these orders are not followed, they're a criminal offence. And each criminal offence attracts 2 years. And since the court orders were put in place, we've documented hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ongoing breaches of the court orders. So we have activists out there, or people that claim to be activists, that are literally operating as a criminal. I'll put that straight out there. It's criminal. The police in Australia won't initiate extradition for them because each of the offences is only 2 years, but you mount them all up and the person can't come back to Australia because they're facing potential arrest and imprisonment. And there's no reason for it. I've never met this person. Other people that have attacked, I've never met them. They've never reached out to me. They never wrote to me or asked for information.
They didn't have any proof in court. Not one proof of the kind of things that they've said. And the judge realized that. So
it's just the things are made up. Things about the working with children case that I spoke about earlier. There were people saying it never occurred. You can write to the courts and get information. Well, you can write to the courts and there's a process. If you want to access court records, you have to apply. Then there's a court hearing. You have to turn up and present your case. So these people don't want to put in the application fee. They don't want to pay the hundreds of dollars to access documents and then appear in court to argue their point of view. So they just make accusations that there never was a case. People talk about saying things like, I'm working for the Watchtower Society, so I need to be taken down. If I'm not working for the Watchtower Society, then who's behind all of these attacks? They just go on. I saw recently that yourself had put some information out there about today's interview, and yet there are still people there that were prepared to use the false information out there.
And one of them is doing it right now. There's a person I've been reading and listening and reading back saying all kinds of things. And it's the same individual and it's the same thing on me and the Masons and the fact that I'm going to be rude and mute Samantha anytime. Listen, if we run out of time, Samantha will get her own program as soon as possible and we'll talk to her for 2 hours. She has such an interesting present history, right? Present. And she has a future in this if she wants it. If she doesn't, fine. But Samantha, if our host gives us a little bit more time, I guarantee you'll be back. But if he gives us a little time, tell us.
Hold on, Barbara. We've got we coming up on time here. We'll go. Yeah, no, we have other programs coming up and there's guests and what have you coming on. But let's go another 10 minutes and then we will have to go to the other program. Okay.
Okay, Samantha, it's all yours. Tell us what your present occupation and everything about you and why you became an activist.
Okay, well, let's stick with the activism because what I do day to day is complicated and there's many different projects that I'm involved in. So I left quite recently. I left in 2020. So I disassociated myself from the organization. Probably for about a year before, I had a series of realizations. But I do have to say that the information on YouTube relating to the Australian Royal Commission was a big wake-up moment. But another one was listening to your interview, Barbara, where you spoke about your time in the writing department of Brooklyn Bethel, and then the issues that you discovered surrounding child sexual abuse, and even a governing body member having had those allegations made against him, who maybe not surprisingly was at one point in Australia. And really and truly, those things just were the nudge I needed to absolutely decide for myself that the Jehovah's Witness organization cannot be directed by God, and it cannot be the brothers cannot have Holy Spirit, because they would be looking after people. They wouldn't be covering up for abusers, and they certainly wouldn't be failing to comply with reasonable requests by a governmental authority to put policies in place and change the way they did things to protect vulnerable children and individuals. So really and truly, I being someone who knows their Bible, having been in the organization for so long, I reasoned on Romans 13 that governmental authorities are placed by God. So I came to the conclusion that actually God is using the Australian government to try to tell the brothers something, and they are failing miserably to get the message. But it's interesting because I saw the attitude they had, the absolute arrogance and pride that they are above law. And having studied psychology and trained as a counselor and worked with people, I could recognize the pathological kind of psychological pattern that was emerging from it. And I genuinely consider them dangerous individuals because of the amount of damage they can do, and also completely remorselessly, if you like, because they feel they are entitled to do whatever they like. So that was quite important for me, to no longer be associated with a group that was not safe to be around. So that's why I got to a point, eventually, I got to a point where I had to disassociate. I couldn't just drift away, fade away. I felt I had to make a stand, because I had trained to be a counselor, a therapist. I was registered with the BACP here in the UK. I still am. I have a duty of care towards people, that I make sure they are safe and they have good mental health. So how could I go door to door and tell people to become a witness when it's not a safe space to be, and it's certainly not safe for children? So so I left with quite strong opinions about the fact that the group I was previously part of was getting up to things they really shouldn't, and they should be held accountable 100%.
Yes, that's the way I felt. I wasn't accusing people specifically of a crime, but I felt that they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they just never did. So what are you going to do? And then it develops that it is a crime to not do it. So, yeah.
Well, this is it, because I remember reading a Watchtower article and them explaining about the sin of omission. So sometimes this is the thing is, and I now know that Stephen often finds things in those publications that they've published over the years that then kind of trips them up in court, and I think that's brilliant. It's like a poetic justice, isn't it? Yeah. But one of the things that I remember as a little girl having this moment, if sometimes not doing something is a sin. So sometimes your action is a sin in itself. Sometimes failing to take action is a sin. And the interesting thing is that there's now some cases in the courts that have come to light where, for example, the elder's not reporting to the authorities an abuse case. The judge has considered that to be the crime. So, so
that's what's in the works all over the place, is that about that being a crime. The two of you are working together, and you've got a lot of things irons in the fire right now, and there's not really enough time for you to go and talk about these things. How about the two of you come back in a few months and tell us how all of what you're doing now, Samantha, could you tell us real quickly about Inside Story?
Yes, so there's already in preparation a series of videos that are going to go into more detail of some of the things that Stephen's touched on today. And there's going to be some information that isn't really out there at the moment about how certain developments have come about. And I think the thing is that we are all quite familiar with individuals that have a high profile, perhaps on YouTube, and put out a lot of material. Obviously we're familiar with Stephen's JW Leaks website, but there's also a huge amount of work that he's done in the background, and with individuals like Lara Kaput and others that he's worked with, and yourself, that isn't really known to people. So this is going to really sort of chart some of those big milestones that we touched on today, how they came about.
Is that
okay. Yeah, we feel that's important because the story of the grand jury in Pennsylvania, that needs to be told. We need to sit down with Barbara Anderson, do the video documentary, hear the story, go and meet the politicians that helped, go and speak to the people.
Rossi, Representative Mark Rossi,
Yes, Mark Rossi.
who is
And
abused himself at 12.
get these,
Yeah.
yep, exactly right. Get these people together, record it for posterity, and make it into a documentary and release it. These are the things that need to be told, because if they're not recorded now, when will they be recorded?
And that's going to take money. And so you're going to have to go back to work in the hayfield, I got to say. But
Yep.
Samantha, anyway, I'm not asking for people to open up their pocketbooks and you do what your heart leads you to do. But you have to know. I know when I started talking about the guy in Kazakhstan a few months ago, and he put out his own money in a poor country, and he was going to Poland, and every year 3 years representing OSCE organization, and he was talking about human rights, and he talked about Jehovah's Witnesses, and he told the truth about what's going on, but it cost him money, and he had to get there. So we asked if somebody would contribute. Somebody did. Someone contributed $2,000 that we sent him, and that gave him some money to pay back. He's been the one that was putting out the money for the lawsuits of other JWs whose kids were molested, and they sued the society and won. They won 4 or 5 cases. But who puts out that money for this expensive of attorneys and so forth? So it's good that people know that this is going on and come back down to earth and realize the efforts that go in here. And we don't do it for glory. I could be sitting enjoying myself right in front of the TV right now and eating supper that I prepared. And the big deal, right? But I mean, at my age, I could be doing, put my feet up, whatever. Every day, the emails that come in and the messages that come in from broken people. How can your heart not go out to this? I cry over this. I became a witness because I cried over what was happening in the world. I come from Polish people who went through the Holocaust, and I heard about it day in and day out as a child in the U.S. So I wanted hope for the world. Watchtower had it. I thought, we lived a dream world. It's time to wake up. And I can't say it any stronger. If you want to help others, if you want this to stop with the Watchtower, they got some of these asinine elders left. The good ones are leaving, or they're in disguise, PMOs. But it's got to stop. And I wish they'd go out of business and then we could all retire. So I'm taking too much time here. So Samantha, you got some closing words, and I'll tell you come back, put it on your calendar when you can come back and tell us what you're doing, and I want the effects of it. We don't have to go back to 2011 and reinvent the wheel. Okay, Samantha.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, I really look forward to that. And you touched on really feeling for people that are struggling because of things that they've experienced, things that the organization that have happened to them in the organization, maybe the struggle after leaving. And one of the things I really do believe in is working with other people to achieve things. So, I'm very excited about working with Stephen and people like yourself, but I've also gotten together with 2 other ex-witnesses that have left quite recently. A shout out to Andrea and Quinn. And we've just started a podcast that is purely about the challenges that you face and we all face individually after leaving, how to navigate those, how to get our life back together, and how to really disprove what the organization claims, which is the minute you leave the organization, you're going to become a crack whore. That's essentially what they say. And the whole podcast is about, okay, there are challenges, and we know there's a lot of heartbroken people, but let's all work together to share how we've navigated things, how we've found ways to heal, to move forward. So we've just put the first episode out. It's called Free and Alive. So I'm really interested in not only the campaigning and activism that brings to justice and brings to light all the unlawful things that the organization does and all the human rights violations. But I'm also very, very interested in helping individuals that leave become free and alive.
Free.
So really free of the mental shackles that the Watchtower has put in our mind. And as someone born in, I'm still working on that. I still have to catch myself sometimes using words like worldly, truth, things like that. You have to actually really consciously fight and work in extracting that from your mind and starting to open yourself up to possibilities and giving yourself permission to get an education, get a good job, have a family, buy a house, have a life, and do something meaningful. So I feel very, very strongly about that we also need to, support each other in the recovery process.
Exactly. You said it all. And we have to give credit where it's credit due too. There are many on the internet that are doing very, very well. There are therapists on the internet, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who are therapists. There are people who have studied the whole situation of psychological trauma, and they're putting time and money into helping others. So we're not alone. There's plenty, and they deserve the credit too, because it gets old after a while. And I speak from experience that will it ever end? No, it's never going to end as long as this kind of religion is in existence, until they change their policies and get rid of shunning. Mandated shunning is the biggest problem, and the disfellowshipping, which comes from the Inquisition, as I opened up my talk here. Oh, from the Catholic Inquisition. What a horrible thing that the Watchtower picked up from them. And of course, God was leading them, they said. It is ridiculous. And there's so many injured people, millions of them since 1879. Even the very founders of this these ideas of this dream of a millennial reign and all of the dreams, even they were burned by their own beliefs. It was a dream that turned into a nightmare, and I end my case. Thank you very much. You got anything you want to say? Anybody? Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Samantha and Barbara and Steve, and thank you for coming on. We had a great amount of people coming in here tonight on the various networks we're on. When it's uploaded to YouTube, I'm sure that'll get many, many views. But thank you all for your efforts, and thank you for putting forth everything you have in you. Barbara, I know you missed supper tonight, right? You guys have put forth an effort to get the word out, and thank you all. Keep waving that flag of victory. Barbara, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
And thank you, Rick. Thank you for hosting this opportunity to see if we can be useful.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you,
Sam.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now, listen, don't be strangers. We got a lot of new things going on here tonight. We've got JW World News coming up next. And then, of course, at around 10 o'clock, we have Awakening After the Watchtower. So that'll be on next. We have JW World News, as we say. So don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We're going to end this stream. I'm going to go over to the JW World News studio.